Welcome, beautiful soul, to the I Vote for Me Women's Summit, where women choose themselves without apology. I'm Sherry Queen She Burden, your host and guide for this transformative experience. I created this summit because every woman deserves a space where her voice is honored, her story is valued, and her worth is non negotiable. I Vote for Me is more than a movement. It's a declaration that we are done shrinking, done settling, and done abandoning ourselves. This year's theme, Cultivating Self Worth, invites you to rise into the truth of who you are, not the version shaped by expectations, trauma, or survival, but the version rooted in confidence, clarity, and self love. Throughout this summit, you'll hear from powerful women who have rebuilt themselves from the inside out, and their stories will meet you exactly where you are. I'm honored we're here and that you are here. I'm proud of you for choosing yourself today. And now, let's begin this journey together with our first speaker, whose message will open your heart and set the tone for everything that follows. For this next speaker, I need to take a breath because this introduction is personal. Mary Ellen O'Brien has been my life coach for over 3 years, and in that time, she has walked me through my highest highs and my lowest lows. She has held space for my breakthroughs, my unraveling, my rebuilding, and my rising. And she has done it with a level of intuition, wisdom, and compassion that can only come from someone who is truly called to do this work. Mary Ellen is a soul path coach with more than 20 years of experience guiding spiritually evolved women back to themselves. She helps women who have drifted, veered, or gotten lost in the noise of life return to their true path, the one their soul has been whispering all along. What she has given me is beyond coaching. She has helped me discover my true essence. She has taught me how to practice self-compassion in a way that feels real, embodied, and sustainable. And she has reminded me again and again that even coaches need support too. I am who I am today in part because of her presence, her guidance, and her belief in me. It is an honor and a deep, heartfelt honor to introduce the woman who has poured into me, challenged me, grounded me, and helped me return to myself. Mary Ellen O'Brien.
Hello, I'm Mary Ellen O'Brien, and I live in Beacon, New York, which is an hour and a half north of New York City. Well, this is such a great topic and question, and thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I was thinking about self-worth even when I was young and little. I was the youngest in my family, and I just remember seeing a lot of chaos and really wanting to be the harmonizer and wanting everyone to get along. And it's still who I am now, which is funny, of course, but I definitely feel like I was disconnected from myself, and I was so focused on everyone else and adapting and making sure people were getting along or mediating or making sure I was really good. I wasn't being my true self and expressing myself fully. I was very filtered and censoring who I was, and I wasn't even aware of who I was until much later. I think what happened to me was I started to have issues with my career, my relationships, and it was because I wasn't strong in myself. I was putting other people's needs before my own. And I remember going early on to a career counselor because I didn't like my job. And I decided, and that was actually really me standing up for myself. But when I went there, she asked me all kinds of questions that I just didn't know. She asked me if I would prefer a creative job or analytical job. And it was fascinating to me that I just really had no clue who I was. And so that was the beginning of really the work I do now. So to me, and I don't know if this lines up with the true definitions out there, but self-confidence is something everybody understands. When someone's confident, they walk into a room and they're bold and expressive and they don't care what other people think necessarily. They're very confident, and it's a little bit more externally focused, in my opinion, but self-worth is more an intrinsic valuing of yourself. It looks like self-confidence on the outside, but it's really it's coming from this deep inner connection where you trust yourself and you walk your own path and you speak your own truth and you set up boundaries and you also express your beautiful gifts in the world and make the difference you're here to make coming from self-worth. You're not attaching it to any definition of an external role. It's really an unconditional valuing of yourself and a deep connection to yourself. I remember specifically being in a relationship. I was in New York City, I was single, and I was in a career I didn't love. I was in advertising, and I just decided I really wanted to make this career change. I just knew I wasn't happy, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And amazingly, I would set aside time for myself on weekends to start investigating other careers. This relationship, the boyfriend, didn't value that. He thought it was ridiculous, and he was judging me for spending time looking at different alternatives. And that's when I said, oh my gosh, I need to value myself and not listen to his opinion and do whatever he wants to do on the weekend instead of me carving out that time, because I worked full time. I really needed to carve out that time for the self-discovery process, period. And I noticed I was undervaluing myself in the relationship because before that, I was just going along with whatever he wanted to do. And so once I started standing up for what I needed and he pushed back, I broke up with him because he wasn't there supporting who I was. And so I took over the role of supporting my own self-discovery process and my own path to greater fulfillment. Yes, I know that when I was realizing that I was dissatisfied, very unfulfilled and unhappy in my current career, a lot of what was happening was this voice that came along and said, yeah, but you're working in music and advertising, looks so good from the outside, and people would love to have that job. You're lucky to have a job, and look at all your friends in that job. They all love it. What's wrong with you? I just kept letting that voice drown out the beautiful, subtle voice that was coming through like, no, there's different work that you're meant to do that is not involved in just placing music in a pharmaceutical drug ad about foot fungus. It just really didn't make a difference to people. I just felt like my purpose there was not important enough. And so I listened too much to those voices that you should just be happy where you are. Don't listen to that stirring voice that wants more, because not everybody can do that. And so slowly but surely, as I went through this big self-discovery process, I started to discount that voice and sort of notice it and not believe it. The voice that said you should just be happy. And it got replaced with this voice that, no, I'm going to find what I am meant to be doing and what would be more fulfilling for me. Mainly, I think it was an internal voice because I didn't have a lot of people telling me I wasn't enough. It was more my own harmful, negative, inner critic, self-doubting voice that you can't, who do you think you are? That you can find work that you love and make enough money. I was single, supporting myself. So it just was this more of my own internal voice. I know other people have external voices that tell them they're not enough and they can't do what they want to do or pursue something better. But for me, it was this internal voice, and I absolutely had to tame it because it was just not true. I tamed it by doing all kinds of personal growth and coaching and spiritual growth workshops to really uncover who I really am and discard who I am not. And that's, of course, the beautiful soul's work I'm doing now is helping people do the same. So it's one thing I want to say is that sometimes our own struggles and pain of learning to value and have our own self-worth, the pain that I went through for all those years is so worth it now because I can help others through it. And it's almost like now I have a shortcut for others because I suffered so much. And so when people are suffering, know that probably it's related to value you're going to bring to others. I do love that book. And it was something that was introduced to me that I recommend so strongly is called Taming Your Gremlin by Richard Carson. And it's so helpful. It was introduced to me 25 years ago through in my coaching training program. And I still hear people referring to it often because out of all the books, and I've read a lot of them about your inner critic and your self-doubt and other people's opinions, this one is so helpful because it's a simplified method and a workbook to help people simply notice those voices that dampen our spirit and then really reclaim the other voices of believing in yourself. So I recommend it. There's an audio version, and it's just a way to begin to notice. And many people are aware that they have an inner critic. And even when I work with therapists, they love this book because it's such a simple method of simply noticing more and more these voices that are not true. They're just trying to keep us safe, but it's outdated. It keeps us in that fight or flight mode. But when you simply notice it, it doesn't get too much energy and you come back to who you truly are and what you truly know. And that's that self-worth place. It's hard to think of one small step, but I know there was a period of time when I was so dissatisfied and unhappy and frustrated. And I decided that I was trying everything and nothing was working. So I shifted gears and decided to really pamper myself. And now it's very popular, self-care. I like to call it soul care, where you really start to carve out time for yourself and do things that you love to do. So at the time I lived in New York City and I would go to parks and by the river and journal. I was really on a journey of getting connected to myself, getting to know my true essence. I recommend for anyone to start to carve out, and it's not easy when your life is full, to carve out even small moments of drinking your coffee or tea and watching the birds outside, just small moments where you can connect fully and be in the present moment, but connect with your true self. These moments will lead to more and more recognition of your true essence. And so some people love journaling, some people love walking in nature. Those are things that really help me connect, but other people really love learning and researching, travel and adventure, even exploring a new town or a museum or seeing beauty. So there's so many activities that people enjoy. At first, you might not be familiar with what energizes you. I call it charges your battery. But carving out the time, saying no to things that drain you, screen time, TV, negative conversations, carving out the time, prioritizing and setting boundaries to connect with yourself and do these small activities that really energize you. I recommend it fully. It's the beginning of this big process of self-discovery. I thinking about who supported me, I'm thinking about teachers first and foremost, workshop leaders. I went to see a spiritual coach. I then had a mentor who was a career coach. These women and meditation teachers, yoga teachers, these women really helped me see that I was valuable and that this process of doing these practices were extremely helpful and they were very supportive for me. It's not always people in your inner circle, your friends and your family that recognize this change taking place. And sometimes they don't like the change taking place because they don't understand it or relate to it. And then when you're going through a big awakening, and it's very uncomfortable when people don't understand. It's almost like an identity crisis happening. So these beautiful teachers, whether I knew them personally, I did know most of them personally, but the ones that I read their books, each and every one that was speaking the truth and that resonated with me was a magnificent teacher and role model for me. At the beginning of this process, when you're like a sprout coming in the garden and you're pretty vulnerable, it's too easy to let other people stomp on the sprout or to stomp on it yourself. So I recommend, when you are prioritizing little moments at first, your own personal practices to increase your own connection, charging your battery, like I mentioned, it really helps to have that boundary, and you will get pushback. So not letting people stomp on that sprout that's getting stronger. It's easier when it's stronger and it's a tree, then nobody can stomp on your sprout. It's the same thing as if someone says, I want to start a new business, and they share it with too many people and they're almost trying to gauge if it's a good idea or not. That is not a good idea. If it's a new idea that's vulnerable and it's a sprout, it's really helpful to strengthen it first and really come from a place of unconditional belief in it before inviting possible naysayers that could stomp on it. So the pushback happens, but what I've noticed with myself and countless women that I've worked with over 20 years is that as the sprout grows, the beginning is hard because you have to maintain and stay true to yourself. And the people in your world aren't used to that and they don't like it. But it's so worth at the beginning staying strong and staying true to yourself, because then guess what? Very quickly they adapt and they adjust to the new dynamic. And then actually they are benefiting because they're seeing you. When they see you, they admire it, even if they're not outwardly admiring it because they feel threatened at first. But deep down, they are for it. But it doesn't always look that way at the beginning. But just trust that they will get on board. And if they don't, if there's a person that just wants you to stay small and wants to keep stomping on your sprout, it's something to look at. I don't recommend right away making big changes, quitting jobs or getting divorced or leaving town. But I do recommend the more you strengthen your own self-worth, the more your external life begins to reflect that. You'll know when the time is right to make changes, but do it from a place of strength and not from that sprout place. So I hope that helps. I love when people begin prioritizing themselves. I'm not talking about 20 hours a week. I'm talking about a moment here and there. It could look like 5 minutes a day at first. When you begin to prioritize yourself with these small activities and moments where you're reclaiming who you are and your self-worth, and you begin to receive inner guidance to go to the yoga class, to go to the feng shui, go to the tai chi, go to the health coaching seminar, to begin to explore this aspect of who you really are and your self-growth. Once you start doing that, you find your people and you start to realize there's this whole other world of people that you relate to. It's your people, your tribe. You might join a book club, you might join an exercise club, gym program, and they're there. Once you start to feel seen and heard by these people that are your people, it diminishes the pain of not feeling understood by some of the other people in your life. It's not that we discard everybody if they're not on the same path. It's that we begin to build up our beautiful community of people who see this other aspect of ourselves that's emerging. And it just keeps coming and coming. And it's a beautiful thing to witness, where people feel in groups, they feel like they belong. They can be even more unfiltered and uncensored and be more of themselves. So I just love watching that process happen with people, where they start to trust themselves in a group. So if there are women out there who feel alone and they feel like they're the only ones experiencing this pain, it's not true. There's so many people who go through this. I don't even want to call it a identity crisis, but that's just what culture has labeled this, where you're reclaiming who you are and your self-worth. So if you feel alone, please know that you are not alone, and begin to find those other groups. And it might feel uncomfortable at first to go to a meeting or a meetup or an event or a workshop, But as you do, you will find more of those people and you won't feel alone. And there'll be other women in the group or men who lift you up, and you can see how they are maybe further along in their own self-worth process, and they can be a role model for you. So if you feel alone, seek out a group and just try it on. Be bold, be brave, and see what happens, because I know it's the beginning of you feeling less alone and more that you belong. I walk my own talk because I absolutely love having my own list of activities that charge my battery, and they alternate with seasons. So let's say everyone has an ideal list of 10 for that can rotate and change over seasons or times. Right now, mine are meditating and journaling and walking in nature, exercising, learning, connecting with others, having deep conversations, doing my work. My coaching work with individuals is just the most rewarding work, and it feeds my spirit so much. I feel so energized after a coaching session because I know that person is feeling seen and heard clearly. And then it's very inspiring to watch the process of people waking up. Right now, I love seeing the water, and I live near the river in New York City, but to be at the beach is even better. So I make sure that I get to the beach. And even sometimes if it's in the middle of the winter, and I know seeing the blue water in the ocean is lights up my spirit, I even found this Caribbean Life show just to watch this show about seeing the blue green water. So it's not that we have to go to Italy if we just love different cultures. You can actually rent movies, you can read books about different cultures if that's one of the areas that lights you up. So there's always a way to find it without money, without time, without moving, to find these activities that charge your battery. So those are the practices right now that for me that really get me back to who I am and help me sustain the self-worth, being centered in my self-worth. Yeah. Yeah. If I notice I'm tired and I'm starting to have negative thinking, I can recognize it right away. This is from years of working on this. I can recognize that I have veered and slipped. And as soon as I recognize it, I will then grab my list and do something on my list, because if I don't, that gremlin, that inner critic voice, can keep attracting and gaining momentum, getting more and more energy. And nobody wants to go down that rabbit hole and feel low and discouraged. It can happen. So if I'm tired or if I'm under stress, I can quickly notice that, oh, why am I judging people or why am I getting irritated? Let's say someone's tailgating me, or it's a good barometer for me to say, wait a minute, that's not the way I normally react. Um, and then I'll go ahead and as soon as possible prioritize one of my many practices. Some people enjoy listening to audio podcasts or audiobooks. Sometimes if you're mind is in that negative thinking, you can listen to something really positive and it kind of pushes out those other gremlin thoughts. So that's something I definitely am aware of because it can happen. This gremlin is not something we banish, get rid of. It's an outdated part of us that is trying to keep us safe, but we need to maintain our connection to our self-worth and recognize that self-doubt part when it comes in sooner and sooner. The best thing is to notice it really quickly and do something about it before it gets a hold. I will say this, that with so much happening in the news, that it's so helpful for me. I'm one who wants to be informed, so I prefer to read news from reputable sources to get my information. But I do not go down that rabbit hole too much because that will get me spinning into the gremlin mode. There's a lot of fear and my own fear, and there's just a lot of emotion there that I want to be informed, but then I step back. And so everyone has their own way of dealing with external circumstances, whether it's the news or their own personal life. But even if someone is living in the middle of a big external circumstance that's very difficult and challenging, they can too find their center more and more. And the more centered you are, the more love you can share, the more clarity you have, and the more help you can be to those around you. Yes, and I think this is where it's like the rubber meets the road, they say, where when you are faced with cultural gremlins, basically, um, wanting to bring down and diminish a woman's power and magic, it's very important to find role models that stood up against any external judgment. Judgment is not strong enough of a word, but putting people down. And so I think there are so many amazing role models out there of people who withstood all of this energy coming at them and trying to bash them down, but they stood strong. And that I think is really helpful for us to remember and to see and to remind ourselves of all these people who came before and who are living now, who are really beautiful role models of standing in their self-worth no matter what is going on. It's helpful to know that your self-worth is not tied to your achievements or your external status or your financial situation or your materials, stuff, things. It's an intrinsic, unconditional valuing of yourself. Someone could be in jail and have a really strong self-worth. I know that's a weird example, but someone can be in the middle of a war and still maintain their sense of self-worth. We can find those examples in history, and that really does help us remember. It's very attractive and appealing to watch those people because on a human level, we know that we can do that too. So whenever we do that for ourselves, we know we have unconditional worth. It's not tied to what we do or say or have. It's just we are worthy, period. I love this question. I do love when everyone has their own story, but when you see story after story after story of women who have been a shell of themselves and have put everyone else first and completely lost who they are. They had almost no sense of self. And I can relate to that. I really felt the pain of that. When you see examples of people who transformed into something different and reclaimed this other aspect of themselves, it really is inspiring. So my hope would be that even though my story is different than your story or someone else's story, every time we see a similar story of someone staying true to themselves and not just staying true to themselves, but doing the work to uncover the magic and power of who they really are and discarding who they're not and the external expectations and the family expectations. Every time we see an example of that, it's inspiring and it helps us believe that we can do it too. So that would be my number one desire, is that someone hears this and says, even though I have a different story, I can do it too. I love this concept, I vote for me, because it's choosing yourself, choosing what you love, choosing your life, choosing to create and cultivate happiness and purpose and meaning and bring yourself out of challenges and be better for it, as opposed to many people on the planet are victims and they just see that this happened to me and I can't do anything about it. And instead, I vote for me is choosing to put yourself first, to put your own path ahead. And it's not either or. When you vote for yourself, and when I vote for myself, it's reclaiming this part of ourselves, but it's choosing to live a life that is meaningful and worthy and joyful and fulfilling and has purpose. In my own path, voting for myself has absolutely meant that I vote for me means to me choosing yourself and your happiness and your purpose and meaning over pleasing others. My life is very different. Right now, my life reflects who I really am, my true essence, all of my loves, and I love every aspect of my life. And it wasn't always like that. And I think it requires some patience. By doing the inner work, your external outer world begins to reflect your inner work more and more and more. I think some people, or most, I could say most people, think it's the other way around, that you have to, if all these external things aren't working for you, like your career or your relationship, you have to fix it and wrestle it to the ground. But instead, it's this inner work that has to happen. If you're really going to obtain the purpose and meaning and impact, make the difference you're here to make, it only comes from that really unconditional self-worth place. So it's not about fixing external things and tackling them. It's about going within and really getting that strong, and then seeing how your choices begin to reflect who you are more and more and more. And before you know it, your external life reflects everything you love. So that is definitely has been an amazing path for myself. Now I help women do that as well. I love working with women to gain and strengthen who they really are and discard who they're not. My website is awakenyourtrueessence.com. I have many different programs and free content to help people begin to wake up this beautiful inner true essence that I believe most people don't fully realize the gold that's hidden. When we do this deep excavation, we bring it out, and then people can live from that place. There's nothing better. There's no other way to live, in my opinion.